It's the weekend and you have financial questions that need answering. That can only mean one thing. It's time for Jill on Money, the show that takes the mystery out of your finances. Here's your host, Jill Schlesinger.
Welcome to the Jill on Money show. This is the program that takes the mystery out of your financial life. And well, you know, these are turbulent times. This war in Ukraine is devastating. I know so many of you are worried about it. Of course, most critically, we are worried about the humanitarian aspect of this. Just seeing all those people flooding out of the country, it's devastating. And I know that the next level of concern is just general anxiety about your own life. Maybe it's your financial life. And maybe the topsy-turvy markets are getting you a little nutty, and maybe you'd like a little bit of help. That's why we are here. Mark and I are both certified financial planners, and that means we take a holistic approach to your money and you and your life. So if you've got a financial question, just hop onto our website, jillonmoney.com, and click the Contact Us button. That's what Mike did. He's on the line from Washington State. So what brings you to our airwaves? How can we help you out today?
Well, the main question I have is on Social Security and when to take it. I'm kind of a proponent of taking it at 62, spending the government's money and letting my money grow and letting the kids inherit it if I happen to die younger than I plan to.
Mm-hmm. And even though you know that mathematically it is a better bet to wait until your full retirement age or even age 70.
Well, and that's why I'm calling, because I did a little math, and my math points a different direction. So I'm wondering if I made an error. What I found is that, if I take it at 62 or whatever age, by 77, it's a break even. I would get the same amount of money from the government.
When you're running your numbers, what are you presuming you're doing in terms of investing? Like, what is your investment return? If you take the money and you have the money, what is it that you're thinking about in the future that you can do in terms of your return?
I used 4%. And what I did is took the $25,000 I would get each year, and assuming I would just basically put it in its own little fund and let that 125 grand grow. And so by the time I'm 77, where it would be a break even on either way of taking Social Security, mm-hmm. that would grow to $220,000.
Do you have any illness between you have a spouse?
I do.
So are you guys young and healthy? Tell us a little bit about yourselves.
So we're mid-50s, pretty good health. Both sides of the family have some longevity. I mean, I had a grandmother that lived to 97, but most of them get into their early to mid-80s.
How much have you guys set aside for retirement so far?
So right now, total dollars, I've got $1.4 million.
And break it up for me. How much is retirement in a traditional? What's in a Roth? What's non-retirement?
$100,000 in an inherit IRA. I've got 296 in a Roth IRA, just short of 1.1 million in a traditional rollover IRA. So that's where the lion's share of my money's at.
And you guys are both working now?
It's primarily one income. She works part-time in a school, so that's kind of fun money for her. So we live on a gross income of 108. Mm-hmm. Get a bonus of about 15 grand a year, which we don't really live on. We use that for discretionary stuff, funding kids' sports and etc.
Oh, how many kids are there?
I have 3 of them.
How old are they?
22, 18, 16. So I'm almost an empty nester.
Wait a minute. Almost an empty nester is a little bit overstating it. You got 5 years here with 16-year-old. Then that could be a gruesome 5 years, those teenage years, huh?
They are gruesome, but we are getting to the end of the tunnel. We can see the light. The oldest is doing quite well, about to graduate college. So
congratulations! How about paying for school for these kids? What has been your what have you done with oldest, and what do you plan to do with 16 and 18-year-old?
Okay, so what I've committed is I looked at what in-state tuition, and I committed to the boys $25K a year. Mm-hmm. That unfortunately comes out of the IRAs. Back in the day, I didn't quite look at the 1029 plan very close. So my error on that. So I pay a little taxes, but that's what I've been able to do in the last few years with the market returns. It's more than covered what I'm taking out each year to fund college for the boys.
What are you putting into retirement today? Like, what is your contribution level?
So right now I'm putting basically $16K a year into a 401k and another 6 into a Roth IRA.
Mark, does it make sense to stop putting as much money into the traditional retirement account and use the cash flow to help pay for college to reduce the withdrawals from the retirement account? Because I'm thinking that, like, wait a minute, why are we doing this? We already have this nice thing. And, we have it set up so that you could potentially just reduce the amount of contribution this second, right? And yes, you lose your tax deduction today, but really you're in a very low tax bracket, relatively speaking. You own your own home?
No, I have a mortgage of about $348. I got 26 years left to pay. It's valued. Luckily, the housing market's great out here at about $700,000, and so our master plan there is when we retire, we don't want to stay here. We're going to sell it.
Okay, great.
And we'll take the equity, and we're going to buy what we can buy with cash. No debt in retirement.
Well, okay. So I think that number one, what I would say is, you're in the 22% tax bracket right now. I would be happy if you kept doing your Roth contribution, which is fine. If you're putting, $7,000 in, you could put $7,000 into your Roth because you're over the age of 50, but that's it. And then I would stop putting money into my retirement account at work and use that money to help pay for college to reduce the amount of money you're pulling out of these accounts. I'm just worried that under this, I know you asked about Social Security, but I'm more concerned with this idea that you're eating into your nest egg at a time where, like, we're getting close to needing your nest egg, right? So if you stop doing that again for the next, I guess, 5 years, at least, you would be able to withdraw less money from the retirement account. And I think that would be helpful. Obviously, you don't want to touch the Roth. That's your last bucket to choose from. If you were to look at your projections at age 62 and then also your full retirement age, can you give me the numbers that and 70, what is the Social Security payment that you would receive at 62?
So at 62, I'm on target to get $21.28 a month. I get $31.08 at 67. And to tell you the truth, I didn't look at 70 because of my strategy with it.
Yeah. And also, by the way, your wife, because she only works part-time, would be claiming half of your benefit, right?
She would get half, and the homework I've done there, that is the one where I'm inclined to wait till she turns 67 to get the full 50%. And I have not put that money in any retirement calculations. So I just look at that at 67. We're going to get this pay raise of $1,000 a month.
We'll get back to Mike's question in just a second. If you would like to join us on the program, again, just go to JillOnMoney.com and click the Contact Us button, and then we'll get to you. Okay? We'll be right back.
Do I invest here? Should I put my money there? Jill Schlesinger can help you. Back to Jill on Money.
You're back. It's Jill on Money, the program that takes the mystery out of your financial life. And if you want a little more help than just these little interactions, why don't you go to our website, JillOnMoney.com, and sign up for the free weekly newsletter. It's free every single week. Mark puts it together. It's great. Right now, we are going back to Mike in Washington State. We are talking Social Security. I got to tell you something. If I look at this situation, because you're in good health, if you want to net 4%, how would you get 4% with no risk? You can't, because now you have to take risk to get for 4%. And you would actually, to me, taking at 62 has two problems. One is not just that you're reducing the amount of money you're receiving, but also that your wife is dependent on your record. And so of course, statistically, it is more likely that she would outlive you, right? And so if that's the case, we want to try to beef up her number as much as possible. And you do that by going to your full retirement age. And in terms of taking Social Security early, like when are you looking at actual retirement? You're young, right? You're in your mid 50s, but when would you actually say, I'm ready to step down?
Probably 59 and a half or 60.
What? It's too early.
But my plan all along has been, I manage lots of people, so I'm not having fun with it. I want to step away from full time.
Okay.
I fully intend, both of us intend to work part time. So we want to work 3 days a week.
Yeah.
Some low stress job and do that from 60 to 62. Obviously, if I took Social Security early, I would have to slow down on working because of the tax
Right.
hit.
That's by the way, it's another reason to wait till your full retirement age, but continue.
But if we're enjoying the part-time jobs, I would delay Social Security. And part of the part-time work is also to cover the health care, because I don't think I have enough money saved. And it allows me to kind of step away from work and gradually slow down. And then by 65, I'm pretty much fully retired and just doing exactly what I want to do with no alarm clock.
First of all, obviously, if you're both willing to work and just cover your expenses, which I don't know, like just looking quickly, you don't spend a ton of money, right? So, I mean, if you're both willing to work enough part-time to make 50 grand or 60 grand and cover most of your expenses, that's great. By the way, while you're still working full-time, I would encourage you to put some money set aside in a non-retirement account, just like beef up your savings. The long-term risk for you guys is you drop dead when you're 63 or 4 or 5, right? Then she's got a lower Social Security amount and she loses half of that part-time income. And I think that if you really want to play this odds wise, like I'm not saying it's going to be the worst thing in the world. It could be perfect. It might be fine if you take retirement at 62. I just want to play the odds, right? So the odds are that the best bet for you is wait until your full retirement age, work as long as you can stomach it, work part-time as long as you can stomach it. Make sure you get your health insurance coverage until you're age 65, obviously. And that's going to be a safer way to proceed. But there are some real downsides to this plan because you don't have tons of money saved. It could work. I just feel like there is a real risk here of death in your 60s that really leaves your wife in a pickle.
Okay, I guess she would very much appreciate the advice. And I do like the fact of your thoughts on the college thing. I was not expecting that with the question and was wondering, part of I'm doing it to get the employer match, right? I get 8% from them.
All right. So if you have an employer match, then if you just do at least up to the 8% match and pull back on your Roth contribution, then I'm okay with that. I just want you to try to reduce the taxable withdrawals from the retirement account for college. That's my main concern here. And, I think it was very nice that you said 25 grand a year. If I could go back in time, I would have been encouraging you to tell your kids to take out loans. And if you can help them later, you would. It's just like you're eating into your future retirement assets on their behalf. And so I'm just concerned. I want you to be secure so that they don't have to take care of you in the future.
Yes, they didn't like my fail safe was to charge each one of them $1,000 a month for me and the wife to come.
Oh, yeah, that would be fun. I'm sure they'd love that. Do you guys have your estate planning done?
I knew I was going to get hit with that. No, we were a miss in that. I'm a little too much of an optimist. But we are going to get on it. That's part of listening to your show that helped us.
I know I'm an optimist. In other words, I'm so optimistic about life that I refuse to die, which is fantastic. I mean, I hope good luck with the strategy. Here's where I get to beat you up a little bit. I want you to stop taking money out of your retirement account, but more importantly, I need you to get your estate documents in place. It's very easy to do. So let's just do it. Let's get going. Make that a priority. It's far more important than your Social Security question. It really is. I know that right now you've got a little thing in your head that's, still excited by 62. But I think that's really, it's just, we should take that off the table. Full retirement age, working part-time. This will work. Nothing works really well if you die without any estate documents and you leave your kids just piles of problems. So let's just get rid of that as an issue and take care of it. Okay.
Will do. Thank you very much on that.
Any other questions that you have?
The only other question is, I kind of look at this as a bucket strategy. Mm-hmm. And my concern, obviously, the sequence of risk returns is right on the front of my mind here as I get ready to retire. And so I'm wondering if I should, between now and 65, get a little more conservative and put more money in bucket 2 so I don't take a big hit. And then if I get later in my 60s, I may go back to my normal allocation, where right now I'm at about a 70-30, so I'm a little more...
You're a little more tilted towards risk. I mean, look, I think the longest, obviously the Roth money you can be more aggressive with. And if you wanted to pull a little bit of the risk back and go 65-35 or 60-40, that's fine. But I mean, you're not going to need all of this money at once. So I wouldn't go crazy either. So if you're comfortable with the risk and you feel okay with it, that's fine. Any money you're going to need within the next year or two, for example, the money that you think you would withdraw, whatever that amount is from the rollover for college, that should obviously be in cash, right? But some of that money, maybe you have it, a couple of years that's in cash just so you have it. But other than that, I wouldn't go crazy in starting to time the market and do anything. I think you'll be okay.
Okay. Yes, I'm just trying now to slowly transition and fill up bucket 1 and 2, which is cash and the bonds, and be prepared for 60.
I mean, if you're willing to work part-time, I have a feeling if you find something, like you said, if it's fun and it's something that you feel like you can do for a while, it would be neat if that would kind of take you through your 60s and everything will look better.
Okay. No, that makes sense. Yeah, and we very much plan to work from 60 to 65. I mean, I don't sit still very well. It's just I don't want the daily managing people kind of grind. I want a job where I can go in and work at maybe a home center and say, Jill, here's your board. Thank you much. Have a nice day. And when there's a new policy that comes down the line, I can say, I think I'll go find another job.
I gotcha. I know. It's like there is a certain grind to just like being in an organization, right? So, and working part-time, like show up, do your job and move on. That's kind of great too. I think we got somewhere here, Mark. I feel good about this. And frankly, if you're kind of wavering and you feel like you're going back and forth and you need a little bit more of a pat on the back or a kick in the butt, Mike, we're here for you. Okay.
I appreciate it. I will continue to listen, love the show, and thanks very much for the advice. It gives me something to think about really hard, and I might just wait till 67 now.
You might just. I love it. If you would like to review your Social Security options, maybe go through some math, just give us a holler. We're at JillOnMoney.com, and you can click the Contact Us button. While you're there, subscribe to our other programs, Jill on Money, the podcast, and the Eye on Money podcast. Okay, we will be right back with you and your questions.
Welcome back to Jill on Money, where Jill Schlesinger takes the mystery out of your finances.
You're back. It's Jill on Money. And by the way, who among us is not concerned about inflation? Inflation running at a 7.9% pace. Wow, that is blistering hot. And we all have to contend with it in our daily lives, but we also have to contend with it in our portfolios. So right now we are going to talk to Rich from Denver, who wants to think about inflation and its impact on his financial life.
I and my wife, we are in our late 60s. I'm 68. My wife's 66. And we're pretty well set for retirement. We are retired. We've been retired for a couple years now. But we're heading into this period of an inflationary period. And I'm not so confident about guiding my own investments through what I fear is going to be a long cycle of inflation. Being 68 years old, I lived through inflation the last time around in the 80s and 90s, and it was rough and it was long.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering what advice you might have for somebody like me.
Okay, sure. So you've been retired for a few years. Are either of you collecting pensions?
No,
Okay. And are you collecting Social Security yet?
no,
Oh, interesting. So you got a bunch of money saved. That's what I'm
no.
intuiting. No? How are you retiring then? How are you supporting yourselves?
Well, we have a little bit of money here, but we're living on our savings. But how we do it is a couple of ways. We try to keep our finances as simple as can be. And first of all, we have absolutely no debt.
Mm-hmm.
And that helps a lot. And we own our own home. We have a plan for Social Security. We have a plan for long-term care, and we have a small pile of money.
Tell me about the small pile of money. How much is there?
$2.6 million.
Hold on a second. Mark, this is the thing. Now what's going to happen, Rich, is you are going to get the haters out on us right now because you said a small pile of money, and then you described that as $2.6 million, which I think it's inarguable that that is not a small pile of money. It's a pile of money. It's a pretty big pile of money, especially if you don't have any debt. So how much does it cost for you to actually run your household every month?
After-tax dollars is 87 grand a year.
Oh, I like that you have the number. Are you some sort of spreadsheet king, queen?
No, but I sure have given this a lot of thought.
Okay, fair enough. So right now, I'm not calling it a small pile. I'm going to call it the giant pile of money. What of the giant pile is already been taxed? How much do you have in non-retirement savings?
Almost none.
Really? So you're pulling money out of tax deferred accounts right now?
Yes, we have an IRA, tax deferred, and we have Roth IRAs, and we're pulling money out of the pre-tax IRA.
How much is in the pre-tax IRA right now?
1.7 million, but 600,000 of that we hold as cash. It provides a lot of comfort to us, but it's a big part of our long-term care plan.
Okay. Tell me about that. Like, how do you think about that long-term care plan?
Well, we both applied, my wife and I was accepted. My wife was denied. So I have a long-term care policy.
Mm-hmm.
And interesting enough, once the insurance industry decides that I was worthwhile insuring, they tried to sell me more insurance than I asked for. And I took them up on that a little bit, and I feel like I have a pretty good plan, but it'll only pay for part.
Part is better than zero. And how much is the house worth?
Between 800,000 and 900,000. It's going up every time I look.
Mm-hmm. You've got 1.7 in the IRA and then about 900 in the Roth. And of the IRA money, 600's in cash.
Correct.
Any other assets, rental property, anything?
No, nothing.
Like that?
Zero.
Is there anything in the portfolio right now that scares you specifically? I mean, besides the 600 grand that's in cash, which scares me a little bit. But continue.
Well, the 1.1 million is in the Wellesley Income Fund, which is primarily a bond fund, and I'm afraid it will suffer with rising interest rates.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. In the future for Social Security, what is the plan in terms of when to claim and how much would you guys receive?
We'll defer it until 70, and when we're both receiving it, it'll be 69 grand.
We do have an out here, but it sounds to me like we have 4 years where you're going to have to suck some money out of this account, right? But then at age 70, the amount you have to withdraw is reduced, right?
Correct.
Okay. How much money just in cash out of the retirement account?
Very little, just some money in our checking accounts, not enough to matter.
Okay. Is there any reason that you have thought about, because I'm sort of thinking about this, that right now, you're pulling money out at this, you're essentially in, I guess, the 12% tax bracket?
Yes, correct, yes.
Is there any reason, I'm asking Mark this, that you think they should actually take more out and pop some of that money in the 22% tax bracket now, Mark, and get that money out of the IRA in case rates go up? Or do you think it's fine as is? I'm thinking it is. I just want Yeah, I mean, like the money isn't cash. It's a ton of money in cash. I just think that that's one of the problems that I'm when you talk about inflation, one of the big problems is the cash for sure. I'm not as worried about the bonds. I mean, I think, tell me about the allocation. If you got so again, out of the $2.6 million total, you've got 600 in cash, 1.1 in Wellesley income. And then what about the rest? Is that in stocks?
It's in the Wellington Fund. So I have two balance funds and a cash fund.
I guess if you really want to consider this is going to freak you out a little bit. Stocks do pretty well in an inflationary environment. And so maybe you would want to tip a little bit into at least take some of the money out of the income and maybe just go into, dividend producing stocks. We'll get back to Rich in just a second. It's Jill on Money, the program that takes the mystery out of your financial life. If you have questions, just go to jillonmoney.com and click the Contact Us button. We will do all the rest. We'll be right back.
If you've missed any part of the show or want to check out a past show, go to jillonmoney.com for more great personal finance content.
You're back. It's Jill on Money, and we are here answering your financial questions. Sometimes they kind of border into the old big-time economics. We are having a conversation with Rich from Denver. Rich is already retired, and he's concerned about inflation. So let's get back to our conversation with Rich. I'm not so concerned that you are going to get hammered with inflation. I think that you're in this very strange 4-year period where you're sort of self-financing. Like if I could have gone back in time, I would have wanted you to work a little bit longer. But I don't think you're going to run out of cash. I really don't. I mean, I don't think you're going to run out of money either. I think that inflation is going to reset, but it's probably going to reset at a level that is higher than what you probably anticipated when you retired. So if inflation was running at, say, 2% when you retired, okay, it's now 7.5%. It's not going to stay at 7.5%. It's going to be like pretty ugly for a bit, but it's going to settle back down. Whether it settles at 3% or 4% by the end of this year, it's going to be just kind of rough. And then next year, it's going to go a little bit lower. When you run the numbers, if you look at your own retirement planning, if you ran the numbers at let's call it a 2.75% inflation rate, I can almost guarantee you won't run out of money. Almost guarantee that. And is there any reason why we have to bail out of the Wellesley Fund or the Wellington Fund immediately? No, but I would almost suggest that if you had a little bit more in stocks, not a ton, a little bit more, then you might actually be well rewarded for that in case we are wrong about the inflation prediction. Right now, Wellington is 65 stocks, 33% bonds. That's fine. That's totally fine. Wellesley Income Fund. Here we are, portfolio and management. Okay. So that fund is the flips. It's more bonds than stocks. It's 60% bonds and 40% stocks. Still not bad. I kind of feel like maybe if you were interested in, and it would be a little bit more risk, but because you have so much cash, I don't feel so bad about this. I would like you to consider this. Vanguard has a fund called the Vanguard Dividend Growth Fund. Okay. I mean, it's a large cap fund. And I think that it has, it's obviously focusing on dividend producing stocks. And I think I would say that I would kind of look at this and say maybe if you put 10% from the Wellesley into this fund, I'd feel comfortable with that, especially because you have all that cash. But that's about it. I wouldn't do much more. I guess you could add a commodities fund, but you know what? It's like I don't want to make yourself crazy either. But I think that's about all I would do. If something were to happen to either of you, you would be able to self-insure to some extent, but you really would plow through a lot of money. So everyone stay well. How about that? That's your other instruction?
Well, thank you for that. I've considered the dividend growth fund and all, and I try to, I actually try not to overthink things, and I try to do nothing most of the time, and it's worked out pretty well for me here. So I do appreciate the advice. I realize that I'm holding an awful lot of cash, but I've had some illness in my life, though I'm doing very well now. And I've looked at the true cost of long-term care, and of my 600 grand in cash after tax, that's about 400,000 if I needed it abruptly.
Yep.
And it could take the better part of all of that if either one of us needed long-term care.
Oh, no, listen, there's no doubt. If you need long-term care, you guys are going to be under serious pressure, and there are going to be different decisions you have to make. There's no doubt. You know, what we want to try to make sure is that we're balancing the risk with the risk of losing a lot of ground to inflation and not being able to live your life fully should you not have an illness. You know what I mean? So that's the balance here. Do you guys have children?
No.
Okay. And what about estate planning?
We have the standard wills and medical provisions.
Okay. All that is done. I mean, you feel comfortable doing this yourselves right now. Are you the main money manager, or is your wife also on board with all of this?
Oh, she's on board. I'm the main one, but I make sure that I'm not the only one.
Oh, very good. That's exactly what I wanted to find out. I really did. I wanted to make sure that you guys were communicating with one another, because that is the only other thing that maybe breathes a little of anxiety into the situation when one doesn't know what the other is actually doing. So good for you. Is there anything else that we can help you with today?
Well, is there an alternative for the cash? I'm in the Vanguard federal money market.
I mean, there's probably like a little bit of the better cash management option, but it's not going to be a lot better. And so if you really desperately want to be in cash, you're going to get this, like, literally it's going to be 1 or 2 or 5 basis points. It's not a lot. And that's one of the problems, right? I wish you could have more, but it doesn't, I don't think you're going to be able to really crank it up if you really want a cash position. There are some better options. They have some enhanced money market products, and you can certainly talk to the folks at Vanguard about that. But I do think that it's not going to be compelling. Let me say that.
Okay.
All right. If you have a concern about inflation, investing, taxes, real estate, all the things that you're all thinking about, why don't you let us take the burden off of you? Just give us a holler. It's JillOnMoney.com. That's the website. You should bookmark it. And while you're there, you can just see there's a Contact Us button, and we would be delighted to help you out, either bringing you on live or just answering the question. We'll be right back. You're back. It's Jill on Money. This is the show that tries to take the mystery out of your financial life. And to do so, we ask that you send us your questions. And they can be a question about anything remotely financial. So I know we're going to be getting into college acceptance time. So if you've got a question about those crazy letters that go out, what is the difference between financial aid and assistance and loans and grants and it really is confusing. Anyway, it doesn't really have to be about education. I just figure we're coming into that time of year. Maybe it's taxes, maybe it's real estate. Just do me a favor. Go to the website, JillOnMoney.com. Click the Contact Us button. So this one is from Heather, this question. And she says, I just finished my taxes, yay, and started talking to the accountant about IRAs. I max out my IRA and 401k, and I'm wondering, is there any benefit to front loading the accounts? Meaning, does it make a difference strategically to max out these accounts early in the year as opposed to equal payments throughout the year? Does market fluctuation factor in on this decision? Thanks. Well, of course, in hindsight, you would love to cherry pick when you could actually make those contributions. I sort of feel like it depends on cash flow more than the market fluctuations. I think rule of thumb is that a lot of people like to get that money to work as quickly as possible, right? Then the power of time is on your side. But if for some reason your life changes, maybe you'd want that money, maybe you want to wait to see if something else is going on, that's okay too. So I kind of feel like it's up to you. I tend to like to do it in the beginning of the year, get it done, all set, and moving on. But if your cash flow is a little bit tight and you want to hold on to your money throughout the year, that's okay too. So again, your choice. I leave it to you. Okay? All right. So we have a whole nother hour of the program. Very exciting. If you've got a financial question, just go to JillOnMoney.com and click the Contact Us button. And if you want to come on the air, check that box. Mark will do the rest. Okay, we will be right back.
It's the weekend, and that can only mean one thing. You're listening to Jill on Money, the show that takes the mystery out of your finances. Here's your host, Jill Schlesinger.
You're back. It's Jill on Money. And when we tell you that we are going to bring you entertaining and insightful and interesting conversation about you and your money, we also mean we're going to bring you fantastic guests. And today we have a return visitor to the program. His name is Dan Pink, and he wrote a book. He's written many books, but the last time he was on the program with us, he had written a book called When, about sort of thinking about how you make timing decisions about things in your life. Well, now he is back, and Dan has written what I think is one of his strongest efforts yet, and he's got a pile of books. The book is called The Power of Regret: How Looking Backward Moves Us Forward. And so many of us are filled with regret about different aspects of our lives. I thought this was such a perfect book to bring to you, and I hope you enjoy it. So we're going to spend this hour with Dan Pink. Here is the beginning of our interview. Daniel Pink, thank you so much for joining us. I love the book, The Power of Regret. What made you write this book?
I was dealing with some regrets of my own. I suddenly looked up and realized that I had some mileage behind me, which is kind of shocking. And then I also realized that, hey, I have some mileage ahead of me. So how do I make that the rest of the journey valuable? And how do I look backward in order to move forward? What's more is that, I had this moment in my life where my elder daughter graduated from college. And that just made me start thinking about, oh, my God, like, what was my college experience like? And what's happened? How has time moved so fast? And as I started thinking about this stuff, I realized I had regrets. And what was interesting, and this as a journalist, is that when I mentioned it to people, they leaned in. They really wanted to talk about it, and that's a good sign. It was a topic that I felt that people deeply wanted to discuss, but were resistant to doing so.
And what is it about regret that you think is sort of the interesting motivation here? Meaning that you start the book off talking about people who get tattoos like no regrets, right, or Edith Piaf, I have no regrets, whatever. And if I just may quote you, the world view makes intuitive sense. It seems right. And you say it's dead wrong. And you basically say that it's total BS. Why is it BS?
The reason is this. Two reasons. Number one, the philosophy of no regrets is complete nonsense. Everybody has regrets, Jill. I mean, truly, every human being has regrets. The only people who don't have regrets are 5-year-olds because their brains haven't developed enough to do the incredible cognitive dexterity that regret requires. people with brain damage, and sociopaths. Everybody else has regrets. Regrets make us human. They are one of the most common emotions that human beings experience. And you have to wonder, this thing that hurts a little bit is ubiquitous. Why? And you say, and the answer to that question is obvious. It's that regret is useful. It clarifies, it teaches us, it instructs us. And we've been sort of sold a bill of goods. We think that saying no regrets, I have no regrets, I never look backward, is somehow a sign of courage. It's totally false courage. What's courage is looking your regrets in the eye and doing something about them.
And also, as you point out, that you do something about it, but you don't stay there. In other words,
exactly.
I think that's the hook for me that was really interesting in the book, in that, I can look back at a zillion things. I have so many regrets, believe me. I find for myself, the trick is not to stay in that place that's so negative and like, well, why did I do that? And not to ruminate. You say that negative emotions are essential. So let's talk a little bit about how you can look at regret and first identify it, but not wallow in it.
Well, you've got that exactly right, and this is the key: is that we're not taught how to deal with negative emotions. What happens is that we feel like if we experience a negative emotion, particularly a negative emotion like regret, oh my God, there's some kind of debility. There's something wrong with me. Something's gone awry because everybody else is so positive and I'm supposed to be so positive. And so our tendency sometimes is to ignore it, which is a bad idea. But exactly as you say, this is incredibly important. If you wallow in it, that's in some ways worse. And so what we have to do is and no one ever teaches us this. And so what happens is that some of us ignore our negative emotions. And then when they become so overwhelming, we end up wallowing in them and ruminating over them. What we need to do is we need to think about them. And there is a systematic way to confront all kinds of negative emotions, but there's a particularly systematic way to deal with this most common negative emotion that we have, which is regret.
Can you talk a little bit about the if only, at least counterfactual?
Sure. We humans are incredible. Our brains are incredible. We do things that are just breathtaking. And so when you think about counterfactual thinking in general, it's kind of amazing. We can imagine worlds that run counter to the facts. And we can even do it by getting in a time machine and going backward. And so that's what regret is. We get in a time machine, we go backward in time, we change what really happened, then we zoom back to the present and look at this suddenly reconfigured world because of the changes we've done in the past. It's very hard to imagine like raccoons or squirrels doing something like this. 5-year-olds can't do this kind of thing. There are two kinds of counterfactual thinking. So I'll give you an Olympic example because it's a really good, timely example right now. There's some interesting research showing that when you look at the photographs of Olympians on the medal platform, that gold medalists are psyched. They look so happy, understandably. But bronze medalists are also really psyched, but silver medalists are not. And so why is that? Silver medalists outperform the bronze medalists. What's going on? Or what's going on is counterfactual. So the bronze medalist says, at least I didn't finish fourth. At least I wasn't like that guy who didn't get any kind of medal. So I'm really happy. They do what's called a downward counterfactual. They imagine how things could have turned out worse. Silver medalists are kind of agonized because they say, if only I had, done one more rotation. If only I had pedaled a little bit harder, I'd have been a gold medalist. They do what's called an upward counterfactual. And here's what we know. Downward counterfactuals at least make us feel better. Upward counterfactuals make us feel worse, but, and here's a dirty little secret, they help us do better. And regret is the ultimate upward counterfactual, the ultimate if only. It makes us feel a little bad, but it helps us do better. And the reason it helps us do better is because it makes us feel bad.
Oh, wait a minute. Let's go into that a little bit. It makes us feel bad. And so then what? So then we don't want to do that again? Or what happens next?
If we're open to the signal, all right. So what happens is it creates some confusion. It creates like, oh my God, how do I get rid of this bad feeling? One way to get rid of the bad feeling is just to ignore it. That's a bad idea. The other side of it is, let's get concrete here. So you look at a lot of research on negotiation, and one of the things that the research on negotiation shows is that, let's say you do a negotiation, and let's say you make a bad first offer or you accept something too early. if you actually consciously say, okay, I'm going to look at that, I'm going to basically look at the game tape of that negotiation. And when people say, okay, I'm going to actually consciously, what did I regret in that negotiation? I'm going to consciously think about that and make myself feel bad by experiencing regret. What the research tells us is that the next negotiation you do a lot better.
We'll get back to our interview with Dan Pink in just a second. If you've got financial questions or some regrets, give us a holler. Go to JillOnMoney.com and click the Contact Us button. We'll be right back.
Do I invest here? Should I put my money there? Jill Schlesinger can help you. Back to Jill on Money.
You're back. It's Jill on Money, and we are in the middle of a conversation with one of my favorite guests. His name is Dan Pink. The name of his new book is called The Power of Regret: How Looking Backward Moves Us Forward. So we talked about what led him to write the book, but now we're going to focus on why regret is so powerful. Here is more of our interview with Dan Pink.
The thing about regret that makes it so powerful is that it's a teacher. It instructs us, but it instructs us not necessarily in a gentle way. It provokes us, it prods us, it makes us feel bad. And if we're open to listening to that signal, saying, oh my God, that felt crappy. What's this telling me? If we're open to that, then it inexorably makes us do better. And here's the thing, you think about these if onlys and at least. We'd have many more if onlys in our life than we have at least. When you record people's lived experiences and literally count their emotions, we are much more likely to experience an if only than an at least. So what's going on here? So we're systematically trying to make ourselves feel bad? Well, kind of, but what we're really trying to do is that we are human, we are people programmed for survival, and regret can make us better. And if we're willing to, exactly to your earlier point, not to ignore our regrets, not to wallow in them, but to answer the knock at the door and see what they're telling us, they are one of the most powerful tools we have for making better decisions, solving problems faster, even finding greater meaning.
I just love that. I mean, it's very funny because my neighbor gave me the Brene Brown Atlas of the Heart book for the holidays. And so I think it's an interesting companion for your book as well, in that you're basically saying, don't dodge these emotions. I mean, you want to actually label it, you want to understand it, and you want to use it. And what I think is interesting is that you actually you're putting these emotions through a flow chart, which I loved so much. I love myself a little flow chart. Can you talk a little bit about why you use that device to help people get through confronting their emotions?
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. And I think it's because we haven't been taught how to deal with that, Jill. We basically have been fed this bill of goods that we should be endlessly positive all the time. And that's not how human beings are wired. And that's not even healthy. What we haven't been taught is how to deal with these negative emotions. And I think it's relatively straightforward. We have to think about, it's like basically, at a high level, what are negative feelings for? Negative feelings are not for ignoring. They're not for wallowing. They're for thinking. And I feel like there's a relatively simple, straightforward way to deal with our regrets. It begins with something called self-compassion. When we talk to ourselves, especially in the face of our missteps or mistakes, we're brutal. We're cruel. I would never talk to any other human being the way I sometimes talk to myself. And that's a bad idea. What we should do instead is treat ourselves with kindness rather than contempt, and recognize that our missteps, our mistakes are part of the human condition. We're not that special. I was really bothered by some of my regrets about kindness, and they really bugged me. And then I started collecting these regrets from around the world, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm so not special. It's like part of the human condition. And so what we need to do is we need to essentially treat ourselves with kindness, recognize that our missteps are part of the human condition, and that recognize that there are moments in our lives not fully a definition, not the full definition of our lives.
You also actually go through some years and give some studies about regrets. Now, how have regrets evolved over, we don't have to go back to, the 40s, but, in the near term, like in the past 10, 20 years, what are the regrets? How have they shifted in your mind?
Well, they've shifted in my mind. I don't know if they've shifted in reality, because what I did is, as you mentioned, in the 40s, pollsters started looking at this question of what people regret. And then academics picked it up after that. And I tried to do this myself by doing my own very large public opinion poll, trying to get at what people regret. And for years, the answer was people regret a lot of stuff. And then the next decade, people regret a lot of stuff. They regret stuff about their careers. They regret stuff about finances. They regret stuff about health. They regret stuff about romance. They regret stuff of their family. I felt like if I did my own poll correctly, I would crack the code. And what I found is that people regret a lot of stuff. I didn't get the answer. But then I did something else, which ended up being revelatory, which was that I also, along with doing a quantitative public opinion poll about American attitudes on regret, I collected regrets from 16,000 people in 105 countries. It was just a giant qualitative sample. And what I discovered there was something else, that I had been asking the wrong question and looking for the answer in the wrong place. That otherwise I was perfect, Because what was going on is it wasn't about the domains of life. It was about this layer beneath the domains of life that was sort of a hidden architecture of human motivation and aspiration. And that proved to be revelatory, because I found that around the world, people kept regretting the same 4 things. I know you have a lot of entrepreneurs who listen to you. There's a great business idea out there, which is to start a travel agency serving Americans who went to college, didn't study abroad, and regret it. I was shocked at how often this came up as a regret for people. Americans who graduated from college. If only I'd studied abroad. I wish I'd studied abroad. I really blew it. I should have studied abroad. So that's an education regret. Then I have, it's amazing, just hundreds of regrets from around the world that are essentially regrets that say, X years ago, I met a man/woman who I really liked. I wanted to ask her out on a date, but I didn't because I was too chicken, and I've regretted it ever since.
By the way, this part totally blew my mind. I was shocked because I was like, you can't believe
it was?
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I was like, that is shocking to me. First of all, I guess because I'm the kind of person who is goes for it a little bit, but also I'm also the kind of person who's like, I would never look back about that. I don't know why. I feel like I'm more in the camp of, I regret that I did something that hurt you. That's the thing that gets me nuts. So the idea of because I always think whatever. So I might have been with that person, and then, she would have driven me crazy and we would have gotten divorced anyway.
Yeah. But what's interesting is that a lot of people are nagged by the what if question. They're not necessarily saying, oh, this would have worked out great. I would have had this blissful life. I think what really nags them is not knowing. And also, I think that also looking at themselves and realizing that, unlike you, they didn't step up. So that's a romance regret. Okay, so think about those 2 regrets. And then we also have a lot of regrets about people who wanted to start a business and didn't start a business and instead stayed in a lackluster job. So that's a career regret. But the 3 regrets that we're talking about, to my mind, they're the same regret. It's the regret of, if only I'd taken the chance. And one of the things that you see over and over again is that people find themselves at a juncture in their lives. They can play it safe. They can take the chance. And when they don't take the chance, not always, but often, they regret it. And it doesn't matter the domain of life. It could be dating. It could be traveling. It could be careers. And that's one of the big 4 regrets. If only I'd taken the chance, a boldness regret. And each of these core regrets, I think, reveals something about what we want out of life. And I think these boldness regrets reveal that what we want out of life is we want to do something. We want to live. We want to grow. We want to have psychologically rich lives. I do think, and here I'm going sort of a little bit beyond the own evidence that I've collected, but I maintain that the fact that human beings are the only species, at least we know of, that are conscious of their mortality plays a role in in a lot of what we do. We know we're not here forever. We know our time is finite. And when we have that, even that vague sense of the shot clock ticking down, we want to do something. And when we don't do it, it feels terrible.
Okay, we'll get back to our interview with Dan in just a second. During the break, hop onto the website, JillOnMoney.com. And the only thing you need to do, here's your one ask here, just bookmark it so that it's always there for you in the future, especially if you've got financial questions that are bubbling up. Okay, we'll be right back.
Welcome back to Jill on Money, where Jill Schlesinger takes the mystery out of your finances.
You are back. It's Jill on Money, and we are here to try to take the mystery out of your financial life. Before we get back to our guest, Dan Pink, I do want to take a moment to remind you that during these turbulent times when you're really anxious and you're freaked out about what's going on in the world, a really nice thing to do is to get beyond yourself. It's to maybe do something for someone else. We talk about that just at the end of the show always, but I'm talking about specific tips about giving to Ukrainian relief organizations. If you go to the website JillOnMoney.com and you click the blogs section, what you'll see is that I've got a new post up, and at the end of that post, I have some tips, some organizations that you may want to consider. I think it's a really good way to just feel like you're doing something when things are really crazy. So whether it's the International Red Cross or CARE or Doctors Without Borders, or maybe the International Medical Corps, these folks are doing astonishing and powerful things assisting people in Ukraine and the surrounding countries. So I urge you to do that. You'll feel a lot better, at least doing something that you think is positive when the world is kind of going crazy right now. So, all right, just check it out, JillOnMoney.com and the blog section. That's where all of this resides. Okay, now we are turning back to Dan Pink, who's written a book called The Power of Regret, How Looking Backward Moves Us Forward. I like that title a lot. Okay, let's get back to Dan. I was on the board of an organization called StoryCorps, which does, audio stories. Yeah. And the founder, Dave Isay, used to recount this he would say that, like, basically, when you have these conversations with your loved ones, especially at the end of their lives, there are essentially 4 things that they actually say. Okay, so it's obvious, like, I love you, right? That's easy. Thank you. And then the other 2, forgive me. And the other one is, I forgive you.
Oh, interesting.
So how do you think forgiveness plays into regrets?
It's a very, very interesting question. And I think it plays in 2 ways. First of all, you had mentioned, Jill, that you tend to your bigger regrets are hurting other people. And that's the thing that bugs you a little bit more than, say, a regret of, not asking somebody out on a date or not pursuing, a woman who is attractive. There are 2 kinds of regret in the architecture. One is regrets of action, and one of regrets are inaction. With action regrets, I regret what I did. What you have there is you have the opportunity to seek forgiveness. So if you've hurt somebody, again, let me be concrete here. I got a lot of people who have moral regrets about bullying. Okay, they regret a huge number. I was really surprised by that. A huge number of regrets about bullying, and some of them have gone back to the people who they bullied 20 years ago, 30 years ago, and apologized. All right, and so what they're doing there is they are seeking forgiveness, and that is a way, perhaps to extinguish the regret or maybe even minimize it. So for regrets of action, you can ask for forgiveness, you can seek forgiveness. However, I think that for all regrets, there's another dimension of forgiveness that is even more important, which is, and again, I don't want to, I'm not a woo-woo kind of guy, but I think there's another dimension of it that is even more important, which is at some level forgiving ourselves. We are extraordinarily harsh on ourselves. We treat ourselves with so much in such a severe way that we would never treat anybody we actually cared about. And so one of the ways of dealing with our regret is to get past it with a smidgen of forgiveness and self-compassion. But then to go back into this way of dealing with these regrets systematically, that when we forgive ourselves, we begin to open the way to make sense of the regret and to draw a lesson from it. And one of the best ways we make sense of our regrets is by talking about them or writing about them. The disclosure itself is incredibly important. With essentially no publicity, except for a tweet or two, I put up this thing called the World Regret Survey. Say, hey, anybody want to tell a complete stranger their biggest regret? And we got in weeks 15,000 of these things. Because people want to talk about it. So why do people want to talk about it? Because it relieves the burden. Okay. And the other thing, though, is that language, spoken language, written language, it's a conversion process. So negative emotions are, from reading Brené's book, negative emotions are blobby and abstract. But when we convert them into words, they're less menacing. They're more concrete. And that begins the sense-making process.
I have to tell you that this is one of my pet peeves, and producer Mark will tell you this, that I hate happiness porn. I hate it so much. I hate like you can be this, you could be this. I find it terribly boring. I really do, and really trite. It's just
tell me what your definition of that is, or an example of that.
The focus on that we all have to be happy. Like being a human being doesn't mean you're happy all the time. In fact, I would say that being a human being, in addition to regret and having negative emotions, it's like then all of a sudden you feel bad about yourself. It's like watching a movie and thinking that's what love is.
Yeah.
And so I find it really very boring, frankly. And so I'm not that interested in a 4-hour work week or happiness at all costs. I'm really into let's get down and dirty, roll our sleeves up, get those emotions, label them, talk about them, and use them. And there was something about this that really, when you said the 4 different aspects of regret, the one that I also thought was really interesting was connection. I think that there is a regret when you feel like a relationship, you're trying to put context on a relationship that was important at one time and no longer is important. I'm talking more about friendships than romantic relationships. And I thought that was an interesting part of the book when you talked about the woman who was like, I kind of don't know what happened. And then how you get back around and whether you go back and try to resuscitate that, or is that just maybe a signal that was a relationship for a period of time that no longer serves you? Okay, we'll finish up with Dan in just a second. It's Jill on Money. We'll be right back.
If you've missed any part of the show or want to check out a past show, go to JillOnMoney.com for more great personal finance content.
You're back. It's Jill on Money. This is the program that attempts to help you make the next best financial decision in your life. And sometimes that's hard because our financial decisions are clouded by our emotions. And these emotions are so powerful, gang. I know. I wrote a whole book about it. And the reason why they're so powerful is they kind of trump your logic over and over again. So you tend to second guess yourself, or you make yourself feel bad. And one aspect of this that I really hadn't thought of before I read the book that our guest wrote, The Power of Regret, How Looking Backward Moves Us Forward, is that we really often can dwell on a regret of, oh, I should have bought this stock, or I wish I had done this. And you always think it's going to work out great for you, but that doesn't always happen. And so I want to focus on something that Dan writes about, which is called Misplaced Regrets, and focus on that for our last segment with him. Again, I think this is a lot of time that we spend pondering our past decisions, the ones we took, the ones we didn't take, and maybe we're spinning our wheels a little bit. Maybe we don't need to do that as much, and maybe some of it is helpful and some of it is destructive. So we want to kind of end with what you need to take away from this. Okay, so let's finish up our interview with Dan Pink. Is it a misplaced regret? Are you really taking responsibility for something that just was never rescuable or not?
It depends. And I think that in some ways, we know the answer to that question in our guts. So for instance, if you are nagged by this idea, it's like, oh, I should, there's this friendship that came apart. And I think you're totally right that a lot of these connection regrets are as much about friendship and they're much more about friendship and completely non-romantic relationships than they are about romantic relationships. If you say, oh, you know what, I really want to reach out to my friend so-and-so because I haven't talked to him or her for 8 years. And at one point we were really close. My view is that regret is telling you something, right? Because there are plenty of people who you lost touch with who you're not having that thought about. So right. In a way, you're answering that question. And what happens in a lot of these connection regrets, particularly with regard to friendship, is we're wrong. I mean, we're just terrible forecasters. So we think that, oh my gosh, if I reach out, it's going to feel so awkward, and the other side is not going to care. And I can't tell you how often both my reporting and also just piles of academic evidence tell us we've gotten both of those wrong. It's much less awkward than we think. We completely overstate our feelings of awkwardness, our predictions of awkwardness. And the second, it's almost always well received on the other end. Mm-hmm. And so to me, if we arrive at a juncture where we're actually truly wondering, should I reach out? We've answered the question.
Do it.
Do it. Absolutely. When in doubt, reach out. Because there are many relationships that we have or have had where we're not thinking that. I had people who I was friends with, and I mean, I'm thinking about it right now. I'm talking to you from San Francisco, and I have a good friend, who I haven't talked to for a few years, and I mean, he lives here in San Francisco, and I'm thinking, God dang it, like it kind of bugs me that I'm not reaching out right now, and I probably should when I get off the phone with you.
Well, I think you should also. How do you think the pandemic has fostered the idea of regret? Do you think that we sort of our minds were still enough to contemplate some of this?
Yes. I think that the pandemic forced us into more reflection than we typically would have in our lives, just because things slowed down, and because, again, not to be morbid here, but the specter of mortality, which I think is a central part of our consciousness, became even more explicit in this moment. And so we inevitably were looking backward, and when we look backward, we think about our regrets. And so I think it made people more reflective. And I think that coming out of this pandemic, assuming we are about to do that, or maybe kind of sort of doing it right now, or maybe on the brink of doing it, I think it's going to be clarifying. And I think what people are looking for in this post-pandemic world, I'm with you on your point about happiness in the smiley, sunny sense of the word happiness. Mm-hmm. And I very rarely even use that word myself. I like to talk about, I think of it in terms of just of flourishing. And one can flourish not by being smiley and sunny, but by doing something meaningful, and by contributing, and by being around people you care about and who care about you. And sometimes that isn't easy. And sometimes that isn't smiley in an Instagram way, but it is meaningful, and that is a good life. And what's interesting about these 4 core regrets, which seems superficially like I spent a couple of years every day going in and saying, oh, let's read some more regrets, in the morning. And you would think that would be a downer, but it was almost the opposite for the reasons you're saying, which is that when people tell you what they regret the most, they're also telling you what they value the most. And the fact that these 4 core regrets keep coming up people are telling me what they value. They value some stability. Those are foundational regrets. They value growth and psychological richness. They value doing the right thing, and they value love. And I think that's what true happiness is. And none of those things are, Instagram hashtag blessed things. They're things that are about like a deep, rich, meaningful life.
Thanks so much to Dan Pink for joining us. The book is called The Power of Regret: How Looking Backward Moves Us Forward. It's Jill on Money. We'll be right back. You're back. It's Jill on Money, the program that tries to take the mystery out of your financial life. And before we end the program, I'd love to answer a question from listener Sandy, who says or asks, should we worry about our deferred comp account with the market in a downward pattern? I'm hoping that it will last at least 10 years. I don't know what it is. Hoping the account will last. The money will last, probably. Will the market affect our state retirement plan? My husband had a stroke in December. And I'm trying to figure all this out. I don't know if I need to change anything. He always took care of these matters. Sandy, I really wish you would come on the program with us. I mean, it depends how old you guys are. It depends how much risk is in that portfolio of yours. The market probably wouldn't impact your state retirement pension plan because they'll pay out their promised pension amount. But if it's your deferred account, then the market fluctuations will actually hit the account. But if you don't need the money in the account for a while, then you shouldn't have to make big changes. If you do, then maybe we'd want you to scale back some of the risk. It kind of depends on what else is going on in your financial life. This also brings up an important issue, which is when one spouse takes care of everything, then it can often leave the other spouse at sea and a bit unmoored when he or she has to take over. So I really encourage everyone to share information. That's like the best practice. It doesn't mean your spouse has to do everything, but kind of has to understand it, understand the bill paying, and understand the investment strategy, or have relationships with the people who are managing your money. It's just something to keep in mind, because I think it really is sort of a cornerstone of financial planning, is the communication. Okay, I hope that helps. And I hope you guys have enjoyed the show. As always, we like to do a little business. Our music is composed by Joel Goodman. Mark Talercio is our executive producer. And we encourage you to please do something nice for someone else today. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you next time.